1, 2. Believe all women. That has been the legacy of the Me Too movement, #Time's Up. Even when the women themselves are the perpetrators, as we have very famously seen with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, they still think that they can hide behind their gender. But worse, the world automatically believes them. Now, I'm not saying that that is how this case with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni is playing out, because we don't know the truth yet. However, I am seeing a very concerning and repetitive theme coming up again, where people are automatically not only believing Blake, but demonizing Justin simply because Blake is a woman and Justin is a man. The purpose of today's video is to look at it from the perspective of a lawyer and share with you not just the allegations, a summary of the allegations, because I know everyone else has been doing that as well, but more importantly, to share the evidence that backs up each and every allegation that has been made, if the evidence exists from both sides. We're going to be going through them as allegation, rebuttal, allegation, rebuttal. So you can make up your own minds in the end as to what you think, or who you think rather, is more likely than not telling the truth, because that is the standard of proof in civil cases. These cases are civil, they are not criminal. No one's going to be found guilty, but rather they'll be liable. You just have to be convinced that on balance, 51% chance minimum, you believe one side over the other. Now, this whole thing started when Blake filed a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department, and she filed basically a mirror lawsuit with the New York federal court, suing Justin Baldoni, Wayfarer, his company which produced It Ends With Us, his partner Jamie Heath, and others, members of his PR communication crisis team, for 13 causes of action, which includes sexual harassment, retaliation for speaking up and complaining, failure to investigate on the part of Wayfarer, aiding and abetting harassment and retaliation on the part of the crisis communications team, intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress, and false light invasion of privacy, which is kind of defamation light, in the sense that defamation deals with lies that also ruin someone's reputation, whereas false light invasion of privacy is more painting someone in a false or negative light in a way that would be considered highly offensive to anyone, any reasonable person in the plaintiff's position. So you don't necessarily have to lie or destroy their reputation. You just have to paint them in a bad light, in a false light. Now, Justin is suing the New York Times as of today. That is the only lawsuit that has been filed. I have watched an interview with his lawyer stating that they will be filing a separate lawsuit against Blake, her husband Ryan Reynolds, her PR team, and probably other people, but that hasn't been released yet as of the day of filming. And of course, we will look at it and update once we can get our hands on the filing. Justin's causes of action include libel. Now, this is against the New York Times for an article that they published on the 21st of December, 2024, titled "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." And Justin alleges that the New York Times basically colluded with Blake Lively in the publication of this article and parroted her allegations as though they were fact, therefore defaming Justin. Now, since Justin is a public figure, you might all remember this from the Johnny Depp coverage. There is an additional element of actual malice when someone is a public figure, meaning Justin has to prove that the New York Times knew the allegation was false, or at least had a reckless disregard for the truth, which he argues they did because he provided them with, I think thousands of text messages or something of that sort, his lawyer mentioned, and they chose to basically disregard all that. He's also suing them for false light invasion of privacy, promissory fraud, because he argues they basically conned him into relying on a false promise they made, being that, hey, give us your side, we'll give you till noon on this day, before we publish the article so we can consider your story. They never did that, he alleges, and instead they released it earlier than promised. Now, when it comes to Blake, I think everything centers on this document that they have included as Exhibit B in her California filing called the Protections for Return to Production document. Now, she produced this document in November of 2023 after the Hollywood strike, so after filming was on a hiatus. According to Justin, it was really out of the blue. He doesn't know where all this came from. There really weren't any issues on set before they broke for the hiatus. But this document can be used as a summary, actually, of Blake's allegations against Justin Baldoni and the other defendants. Now, it's important to note that this document was shown to the defendants, and according to Justin Baldoni, while they all disagreed with her rationale for requesting the document, because many of its provisions were already standard practice, they were like, I mean, sure, if you read the document, it's a very clear-cut list of conditions. So, for example, here you can see number 1, an intimacy coordinator must be present at all time when artist is on set. And so Justin's side was like, yep, sure, we can agree to that. That's standard practice. But basically, conditions that Justin and the team allege they were already okay with and they were not violating, so why disagree with them? That was their rationale. They say they chose to comply for the sake of the film and to ensure Lively's comfort. Now, crucially, Lively concedes that neither Baldoni nor Heath, his partner, engaged in any harassing behavior following the agreement in November 2023. She admits that her stated concerns were sufficiently addressed at that time. Now, this can be a bit of a problem for Blake already very early on here, because when you look at her filing, right at the beginning, she includes a document that has 30 conditions in it, and a document which she alleges came about after a meeting, an all-hands meeting that was held on the 4th of January 2024 with Justin and the other defendants about the same issues, except she's added more points. You know, it was from 17, she bumped it up to 30. And apart from the extra conditions, the thing that really makes this document not only stand out from the 17.1, but seem a lot worse, seem as though whatever they agreed to in November was not adhered to, is the wording. Almost every point starts off with the words, no more. No more showing nude videos or images of women. No more mention of Mr. Baldoni's previous pornography addiction. No more discussions to Blake Lively about personal experiences with sex, etc., etc., etc. It's written in a very different way to the official document that was agreed to back in November. And it makes it look like these things actually happened. When you say no more, what's the implication? That all of this has been happening and we're putting a stop to it. And by making it look like Justin and his team agreed to this document, that tells us, the public, that they acknowledge the wrongdoing and they agreed to stop doing it. Now, the issue here is that, according to Justin, they have never seen this 30-point version of the document. The first time they ever set eyes on this was when this filing was made with the California Civil Rights Department. According to Blake, this return to productions document came up after months and months of her and other cast members experiencing incredibly inappropriate and uncomfortable situations at the hands of both Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath. For instance, Justin has been alleged to have improvised physical intimacy that had not been rehearsed, choreographed, or discussed with Blake, and without an intimacy coordinator involved. However, when you flip over to Justin's rebuttal, apparently Blake refused to meet with the intimacy coordinator to plan out the film's intimate scenes. Now, unlike Blake, Justin has included evidence in the form of a text message, which you can see now up on the screen for you. So he tells her that he had just hired an intimacy coordinator whom he loves, and he wants to set them up to meet. And then she said, "Great, I can meet her when we start. Thank you, though. Then we get more context when we see that Justin tells a female producer, hey, seems Blake doesn't want to meet the intimacy coordinator until we start, which may mess up the workflow, but I can still meet with her, of course. And then the producer says, that's fine. You'll just have to walk her through what you and the intimacy coordinator are thinking. And he gives her a thumbs up. Now, I'm not in the film industry, okay? I don't know what the standards are. I don't know how early you should be meeting with an intimacy coordinator. All I know is that Justin has provided evidence that not only has he hired one, but he hired one he really likes, and he wanted to set up a meeting for Blake to meet them.
So talk to me about how sometimes you were even the intimacy coordinator in some of those sexier scenes. Like we saw you.
That shouldn't be happening, by the way. You should definitely hire intimacy coordinators, which we did have. Well, thank goodness.
You were teaching Justin how to pull you in.
Where have you seen
this?
There's actually a clip going around. I don't know if you've seen it on Instagram where she's, sort of showing you, like pulling you into her and showing you how to embrace her.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how involved she was in this movie. There were many instances where I honestly just tried to get out of the way.
And so suddenly Blake's story that, Justin is this creep who wanted to improvise things and didn't want an intimacy coordinator involved starts to lose credibility. This is what's going to make this case actually incredibly interesting and unique. Everything's caught on footage in film because all of it happened on set. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see how much evidence there is to rebut these allegations or prove Blake's allegations. Another allegation I want to highlight, which really took the media by storm, is the whole porn allegation that Blake was shown porn on the set, which when you listen to that, if you read that in a headline or someone says it, you just go, what? It's outrageous. And this is how Blake describes it. Mr. Heath approached Miss Lively and her assistant on set and started playing a video of a fully nude woman with her legs spread apart. Miss Lively thought he was showing her pornography and stopped him. He then explained that it's not porn, it's my wife giving birth. And I'm gonna put up the photo for you because it was actually provided as evidence in Justin's lawsuit against the New York Times. Now, this is not random. He didn't just randomly approach to her. According to Justin, there was a reason for this. The video was shown to Blake as part of a creative discussion in preparation for a birthing scene in the film. So Blake was going to film a birthing scene and they wanted to discuss how to make it very realistic. So again, you get a lot more context that Blake's side and the New York Times absolutely refused to do. And with the New York Times, you can really, kind of point the finger at them because they are meant to be an impartial third party. They're meant to be a reputable publication. They're meant to have journalists who do their due diligence. And of course, that's the foundation of Mr. Baldoni's case. They failed to do any of that. Another incendiary allegation made by Blake was the whole getting into her trailer while she was in a state of undress, because she's breastfeeding or pumping or whatnot. So according to Blake, throughout filming, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath invaded her privacy by entering her trailer uninvited. Please keep note of this. She says uninvited, while she was undressed, including when she was breastfeeding her infant child. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath both showed a shocking lack of boundaries by invading her personal space when she was undressed and vulnerable. Now, again, this sounds just on its face incredibly disrespectful, but you'll notice a trend here. There's always a backstory. There's always a context with evidence that Blake, her legal team, of course, and the New York Times chose not to share with the world because they want to share a narrative that works in their favor, which, by the way, is par for the course in the legal realm, in the world of lawsuits, manipulating the facts to favor your client, which is why people hate lawyers. Now, Justin shows up with evidence in rebuttal. It turns out that Blake invited at least Baldoni, at least Justin, into her trailer while she was pumping to work out their lines. And he provides us with this evidence in the form of a text message, a text exchange he had with Blake, which you can now see on the screen lined in red. Blake, on the 3rd of June, 2023, I'm just pumping in my trailer if you want to work out our lines. And Justin says, yeah, sure, I'm eating with the crew, we'll head your way. She says, take your time. And then we can assume that he entered her trailer and they met. with not only consent, but being invited. So it's one thing to knock on the door and to be told, come in. It's entirely another. It's next level to invite someone while you're doing something that she described as vulnerable and intimate. So yet another allegation that on its face, if you just read Blake's side, seems horrible. And then you read the context and you go, I'm starting to notice an issue of credibility with Blake. There's also another allegation that Justin used inappropriate language with Blake, calling her sexy and basically objectifying her, making her uncomfortable, which, yes, falls under the definition of sexual harassment when you are in a work environment. I mean, if you ask me, when you're in any environment, you shouldn't, as a woman or a man, be subjected to that behavior. She even makes him out to sound like such a douche when he had allegedly said, oh, I can say that because my wife's here today. And according to her, this happened more than once. Now, Justin's response to that is quite interesting. He says that it's actually Blake that insisted her character's clothing be much sexier. And when Justin later used the word sexy, he was simply responding to her creative input as opposed to objectifying her personally. And he provides another text exchange between them. And you can see here, lined in red from Blake, will show you both ways, but Beanie is much sexier. Now, of course, this is just a snippet, just a text conversation. It doesn't necessarily completely rebut her allegation. It just shows that she was comfortable using that word to describe her character, and she wanted her to dress in a way that came across as more sexy, but it does provide context at least. I want to move on to the smear campaign allegations now, because that's what this really hinges upon. You know, you've got two Hollywood players here, of course, Blake being a major Hollywood powerhouse, and then you have Justin, the underdog. Now, I am very well aware of all of the interviews that have been surfacing over the past few months. Interviews that Blake has given recently to promote this movie, but also interviews from the past. I'm sure you've all seen the interview where she is 8 months pregnant and she is incredibly horrible to the reporter, who seemed to be just very sweet and very friendly, when she asked her, when she congratulated her rather on her baby bump. I'm sure you've seen it 100 times by now. But that's a really good example of the type of content that has been circulating throughout social media. We all know how social media is. People love to dig and to find historical, I suppose, evidence of certain behavior. It happens all the time. Blake is certainly not the first or last. But according to Blake, this is not organic. No, this was all Justin Baldoni and his evil PR communications crisis team that he specifically hired to destroy her. According to Blake, the purpose of this smear campaign was twofold. First, to conceal the pattern of harassment and other misconduct by Mr. Baldoni and the other defendants. And secondly, to retaliate by destroying her image, her business, everything about her. When I first read this lawsuit, I saw that there were a bunch of text messages that have been provided to support this allegation. There are some pretty bad ones, I will say, between the actual PR specialists. So you've got Melissa Nathan, who's part of the communications crisis team, who was hired by Johnny Depp. And people love referencing that. Like, oh my God, Justin is definitely guilty because people believe Johnny did what Amber alleged. And the only reason he came out on top was because he hired a PR specialist. Because that PR specialist totally had the ability to sway the sequestered jury in Johnny Depp's trial. Okay, yeah, sure. Really, really, really incredible analysis right there. Incredible conclusions we're all jumping to. But this list of text messages here, you can see, they seem complete. And I want you to hang on to this, what I just said. They seem like they're not being put in there out of context. The conversation flows. You can see here Jennifer, who is a PR specialist, saying, you guys need to be tough and show the strength of what you can do in these scenarios. He wants to feel like she can be buried. Now, this is what Jennifer is saying. Don't forget, text messages are all hearsay. They are out-of-court statements because they're not made in court that are being introduced to prove that something is true. So normally hearsay evidence is excluded, but of course there are exceptions. I'm basing it off Australian law. I'm sorry, I'm not based in the States. I'm not an American attorney. But normally these rules operate in a similar fashion in a general sense. So please bear in mind that whatever is in a text message, especially when it's secondhand, like, oh, he told me he wants to do this, it's not very reliable. Maybe that's just how Jennifer Abel interpreted Justin's words. Maybe he doesn't want to bury her. In fact, you will see his text messages, first person accounts, it's, what he's telling his team, portray quite the opposite. They paint a very different picture. You see here a text from Melissa, which also makes it look really bad. It says, imagine if a document saying all the things that he wants ends up in the wrong hands. That's nefarious. It sounds like Justin is out for blood. Melissa continues to say, we can bury anyone, but I can't write that to him. Then they present a text where Justin includes a screenshot of an article about Hailey Bieber, and he says, this is what we would need, which Blake uses as evidence that he wants to start a smear campaign, which on the face of it, without context, it does look like that. There are many other text messages. Now, I will be focusing on the ones that I think really hammer the point home because, for the sake of brevity. But here you have Melissa saying the majority of socials are so pro-Justin and I don't even agree with half of them, LOL. He doesn't realize how lucky he is right now. We need to press on him just how effing lucky. The whispering in the ear, the sexual connotations like Jesus effing Christ, other members feeling uncomfortable watching it. I mean, there is just so much. So again, it's not looking good. But here's a text message or a text exchange that really shows you what can happen, the very different picture you can portray when you cherry pick evidence. So this is a text exchange between Melissa and Jennifer Abel with an article from the Daily Mail attached. Is Blake Lively set to be canceled? And this is where things get they look really bad, really damning for Justin's side without context. Melissa is the one who sends it to Jennifer. And then Jennifer says, wow, you really outdid yourself with this piece. And Melissa says, that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. When I read that, I was like, it's pretty much a slam dunk for Blake Lively at this point. They've caught it, the smoking gun. That is until Justin filed his case. And you're about to learn the magic of cherry picking, the magic of manipulating the facts. Before we get to the full context, earlier when we talked about the he wants to bury her text, I said, don't necessarily take this, at face value, because Justin's evidence in the form of text messages with this team of his paints a very different picture of his actual intentions. For instance, there is a text here from him where Melissa talks about why they don't use bots, which is very central because Blake's team is accusing Justin's team of astroturfing, which they've defined as the practice of publishing opinions or comments on the internet, in the media, etc., that appear to come from ordinary members of the public, but actually come from a particular company or political group. So it is almost identical to Amber Heard's allegation that everything negative against her was because of Russian bots. Apparently I'm a Russian bot. Everyone who is pro the truth, I should say, is a bot. And I'm seeing very similar allegations here. You see it all the time with Meghan Markle. Of course, you all know I cover Meghan Markle. Every time there is negative commentary about these celebrities, it couldn't possibly be organic. It's always the result of bots and a smear campaign. So here we have a rebuttal to that. When they were texting each other in August of 2024, they didn't know Blake would file a complaint in December. So this is not preemptive. The text messages, they're not preemptive. They're not a false trail. Melissa Nathan says, we don't use bots. Here's why. And she gave him an example of why they don't use bots. And now Justin goes, how can we say that we're not doing any of this? It looks like we are trying to take her down. And then Melissa says, it doesn't. They're doing all of this themselves and it's really obvious. And then Justin says, okay, please monitor. Things I'm more worried about is that we are planting these stories, which is not true, obviously. And then Jen Abel says, this is just people reacting to Blake's own actions and interviews. Again, I want to remind you all that this is not preemptive. This is all, at the time for this group of people, private conversations that they never once thought would be leaked or shared with the public or in a lawsuit. Interestingly, they've attached Exhibit D to Blake's complaint, the initial one filed in December, which is the scenario planning for Justin's whole PR crisis situation. I've read through it a couple of times, and honestly, it is entirely in line with what Justin Baldoni and his team are alleging, which is that the only reason he retained a crisis team was to protect himself as opposed to smear Blake. It is very clear that the whole strategy was defensive in nature as opposed to aggressive. You can see here the objective: protect the reputation of Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, and Wayfarer Studios during the promotional period. Now, the document goes into a lot more detail, but their main focus is getting ahead of the narrative. So basically, Justin preemptively hired this team because he felt as though Blake was going to take this further. The only point that one could argue is slightly aggressive in nature is the final one, which says that the team can also explore planting stories about the weaponization of feminism. Now for the string of text messages that really made it look like Justin was toast. Justin's team provide us with the actual screenshot of an actual unedited, I would assume is what they're saying, text exchange that happened between Jen and Melissa. And they point out a few things. So they've included the could they've likely be canceled link. Wow, you really outdid yourself with this piece. And then the sarcastic upside down smiley emoji. That was conveniently removed. They went through the effort of literally removing it from their version, from Blake Lively's version of the text exchange, which really changes the whole tone of the conversation. There is another screenshot that gives even more context. Jen says, "Canceled? The mail is going nuts." To which Melissa responds, "Damn, this is unfair because it's also not me." And this is the 16th of August last year. "Everything now looks like it's me." They even put up a side by side showing us all the differences, how things were cherry picked. And suddenly you get a very different story. There is more, which I am going to be saving for his lawsuit against Blake because it really focuses more on her. For example, how she hijacked the production and basically ousting Justin and his team as directors and producers of the film. And why that's relevant is because all of this really hinges upon Blake portraying herself to be the victim, the underdog, the woman who wasn't protected on set. And so, of course, the narrative of her being this controlling, conniving person who blackmails people to take over a project is in direct contradiction to her claims of being this wallflower who was being made to feel uncomfortable and no one really did anything about it, and she needed her husband to come step in and protect her. And so there is a lot more to the story. And of course, let's not forget the whole promotion of the movie thing. In summary, Blake says, "We agreed to focus on the positive aspects, and Justin's the one who deviated, all to fix his image and to come across as this feminist so that when Blake made her allegations, you know, he'd have some kind of a feminist persona to hide behind." That's her story. And whereas Justin says, no, she's the one who deviated and made the whole thing about frivolity and clothes and, you know, wear your florals and grab your girlfriends, when the intention all along was to focus on female victims and survivors of domestic violence rather than Blake's, you know, Christian Louboutins. I mean, she even knew that her strategy for promoting the movie wasn't the best because she posted a story on Instagram sharing statistics relating to domestic violence in the US and providing fans with a hotline. To me, that looks like an admission that she was maybe veering a bit too far off into the frivolous aspects and nowhere near enough the serious aspects of the movie. Hopefully you got a taste, more than a taste, I would say, of how both parties can present very convincing sides, very convincing narratives, but you should never just focus on the one because everyone has their agenda, especially in a lawsuit. Everyone wants to come out on top. Everyone wants to win. No one wants to hand a win to the other side. And so you have to, before coming to your own conclusion, consider both sides. I know not everyone has the time or the patience to read 80 plus pages of filings. I understand that. But at least don't sway to one side if you're not going to read the other side's filing. If you're just going to go with what the media says, well, remember how the entire world was once behind Amber Heard and Meghan Markle and all these people who wield their gender as a weapon and a shield. Let me know what you all think. I know this was a bit of a longer video, but there was a lot to cover here, and I really wanted to do a back and forth, because you really see the strengths and weaknesses of both sides when you do it that way. At least I think so. That's it for this video. Stay tuned for updates, which we will be providing and covering on this channel until the case comes to its conclusion. Take care, keep an open mind, and I will see you in the next one.